morning. The first thing I want to say is that I am never coming to tGELF again. I arrived late last night, and against my name is the word observer. Now, the speaker on urbanization had two dictionary definitions. Do you remember that? We had, I think it was disaster and panacea. And I'm pretty sure if I clicked up observer now, it would talk about somebody maybe looking at or even looking on, not somebody who's asked at 3 minutes' notice to make the concluding speech. So here I am, and I have another problem. Has anyone ever had swimmer's ear? Anyone know what I'm talking about? It's terrible, isn't it? I've got it now. Swimmer's ear. I went in a public swimming pool, not one of the accidental canals in Delhi, but a public swimming pool in Singapore, and I've got swimmer's ear. What this means is my voice in my head sounds the way I think it sounds to my students. It's just a monotonous drone. So if you can't hear me, put your hand up, or if I'm screaming at you, put your hand up, because I just can't tell. 3 short things from me, 3 short takeaways from what's been an extraordinary morning, and clearly I'm making this up as I go along, but it's a pleasure to do so. And the first was actually the last speaker. You know, I grew up on James Bond films, and that famous line, which you see in so many action movies now, you know, failure is not an option, Bond. Failure is not an option. Yes, sir. Failure is not merely not an option, it's an essential. And certainly at United World College, we feel that very strongly. Failure is an essential, provided, of course, you turn it into a new learning experience. So my first takeaway for everybody here is just that. Please make sure your failures are good ones. I had a French teacher called Mr. Cragg James. I made a mistake in a French lesson, very public. I had my hand up, oh, dear me. And he looked at me, and this was very enlightened for the 1970s, and he said to me, "That's a great mistake." And I've never forgotten that line. That is a great mistake, because it shows you were thinking. God knows I didn't think much in the 1970s, but clearly in that one moment, I was thinking. So that's the first thing. Failure is an essential. Learn from it, and I've done that many, many times, I can assure you. The second thing I'd like to pick up on, and I'd like we've done so many macro things this morning. The scale of what people have been talking about is extraordinary. Let me go very micro, but I hope you get the point here. It follows on from I think, what every single speaker touched on. I remember going around United World College, it must have been my first week, and I walked into a typical lesson where people were talking about social justice, and that mainly 14-year-old boys. There were a few girls in the class, but it was mainly boys. And the lesson was essentially about the way maids are treated in areas of Southeast Asia. And there was much righteous indignation from the boy. This is awful, terrible. How can you treat people like that? Before I'd gone into the classroom, I'd spoken to the cleaner outside. And her name was So-Ann, and she told me how long she'd been working at the college. And I said, "Do you normally clean around here?" "Yes, I do." So while I was in the class, I tapped 3 boys on the shoulder while they were lamenting the state of maids in Southeast Asia. And I said, "Do you know the name of the cleaner outside?" And nobody did. And my point is simply this. One definition of an intellectual is somebody for whom ideas are more important than people. And I think the wonderful thing about this morning is that it's been made very, very clear ideas are the beginning of a journey. So my second takeaway is, please don't be beguiled by the quality of the idea. Don't turn into some self-aggrandissement, self-congratulatory clique where, yes, the thoughts are wonderful, the brain is pristine, the ideas are pristine. You've got to get your hands dirty, because clearly from the soil the roses grow. And there's an example of a failing in my own place where we've got to work very hard on that. And then finally, something which has been touched on, but not very much, and this is very micro and very local, but having heard so much that's so rich for thinking, I thought I'd give you something relatively trivial, but the point at the end is sincerely meant. That's not true, I first went to Singapore in the 80s, but we won't talk about that. That's a deliberate gap on my CV. I first went to Singapore as a respectable human being about 4 years ago, in my late 40s. And I went for a conference, and the conference was actually held in the Marina Bay Sands Hotel. Many of you may know that now. It's quite a famous building, that iconic 3 skyscrapers joined by a bizarre ocean liner 600 feet up in the air. And just underneath the ocean liner is the gym, and I went to the gym. And I know you're looking at me thinking, no, you didn't, but I did. I went to the gym. And in the gym, I decided I'd go on an exercise bike. So I got on the exercise bike, and next to me, a Singaporean lady got on her rowing machine. So she was rowing away, she had headphones in, and I was on the exercise bike next door. On dismounting the exercise bike, I hit problems. I frequently hit problems in gyms, but what happened was I left my foot in the stirrup. So I dismounted, but I didn't completely leave the bike, and my foot twisted, and I fell. If you put yourself in the position of the Singaporean lady on the rowing machine who's got her music on, all of a sudden, this great, big, fat, ugly Caucasian head plonks itself on her lap. And here's a question. What do people do when that happens? And I can answer that question. What they do is they pummel your face as hard as they can. I was still attached to the bike, couldn't move. And the gym assistant ran over, and he pulled us apart and all the rest of it, and he got us to the corner. I had to literally go back to England on crutches. It was quite a serious problem. Anyway, the lady and I sat in the corner, and she was very apologetic for hitting me in the face. And she said, "What do you do?" And through my tears, I said, well, I was in England at the time. I'm a headmaster in England. And she said, "Well, if ever the opportunity comes up, you must apply to the United World College in Singapore. It's just the most wonderful place. My nephew goes there." And I went back to England, and I went back to this wonderful 7-bedroom ancient house that the school had given me, and 100 acres of rolling grounds and wonderful buildings, etc. And I was 48, 49 years old at the time. And I thought I'd done my bit. I'd worked in South America. I'd worked in areas of Southeast Asia. And I thought I deserved this little idyll. And within a few weeks of her saying that, the job came up. And I had to ask myself a lot of questions. I applied, and here I am now. Now, don't get me wrong, living in Singapore is no hardship, evidently. But the point is simply this. There are moments, there are little fissures in your life, your professional lives and your personal lives. Call them what you will, portals, warps. And you have to take that moment. And actually, for a 49-year-old who had it pretty easy in the UK, that was a big step to me. And to you, it might seem so tiny, but I simply want to make the point. Carpe diem. There are moments of fortuitousness, serendipity, call it what you will. So many times I've been too conservative in my life. So many times I've taken the easy route. And my takeaway, because it was touched on once or twice, is simply this. Whenever possible, don't do that, because the riches are utterly unimaginable. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to offer a vote of thanks, but I'm going to, because it's been the most remarkable morning. So to all the speakers, to everybody here, thank you very much.
tGELF, leading the change.